On Monday the 4th of October 2004, Joe Riley got out of his bed. It was 5:30 a.m. and he crept around the house at his home so not to wake up his family. He was an accounts manager for a company called Viacom Outdoor Advertising. He kissed his wife goodbye and crept out of the house to work. He had been married to his wife Rachel for 13 years and the couple now had 2 sons together, 2 and 4. After arriving at work on the Bluebell estate and starting his working day, he messaged Rachel to say, "Did you and the boys sleep okay? Wish Jackie a happy birthday for me, kiss kiss kiss." But Rachel did not reply. It was unusual. Joe then left voice messages between 11:52 a.m. and 1:45 p.m. At 1:15 p.m., just after lunch, Joe received a call from his son's daycare. They called to say that his wife had failed to pick up their sons at 12:30 p.m. as they usually went for half days, so she must have dropped them off that morning, but why did she not pick them up? He called her a couple of times, each time leaving messages asking if someone else was supposed to be picking them up and telling her he was worried, asking her if she was okay and telling her to call him back. So Joe left his work to collect his sons from daycare, and on the way he called his mother-in-law to ask if she had spoken to Rachel. Joe told his mother-in-law that he had not been able to get in touch with Rachel all morning, and calls to mobile and landline were all going to answer phone. Joe asked his mother-in-law if she could go to the home and check on Rachel, while he travelled to the school to pick up the boys. Whilst driving along, Joe then called his wife again, but still nothing, and by now he was getting very concerned, wondering if something might have happened to her. Joe also called Rachel's younger brother to tell him what was happening. He also tried to contact Rachel, but again, he was unable to also. While Joe was picking up the boys, his mother-in-law Rose had arrived at the family's bungalow. As she arrived, she noted Rachel's car in the driveway and felt a sigh of relief. Her mother Rose tried the front door, but it was locked, so she walked around to the back of the house. The patio door at the back was open. Some of the drawers in the kitchen had been pulled out, whilst items were strewn around all over the floor and scattered throughout the house. The home was silent, and in the living room, videos were placed in a pile. The home then looked like it had been ransacked, but there was no sign of Rachel. Rose walked slowly up the stairs to Rachel and Joe's bedroom. She stood back shocked as she saw her daughter laid in a pool of her own blood. There was no signs of life, no movement, no breathing. Blood covered the walls and the ceilings. It was even in the bathroom. Her mother touched Rachel and remembered her as being as cold as marble. Upset and shocked at what she had seen, Rose ran back down the stairs, grabbed her bag and ran outside screaming. She contacted the police before calling her son and her husband. Not long after 2:30 p.m, Joe arrived at the home with the children. Rose told him what she had found upstairs. He ran into the house and up the stairs shouting her name until he came to her body saying, "Jesus, Rachel, what did you do?" The police were now on scene and no one was allowed in the house. Before long, Rachel's father, brother and sister all arrived. They stood outside crying and discussing how none of them had been able to get in touch with her. When the first police officer had arrived on scene, Joe had ran up to him telling him that he had been up to see Rachel and that he had touched her body to see if she was alive. He also said that he had moved a box that laid next to her into the boys' room and hoped that he had not destroyed any evidence. When police requested alibis from everyone who knew Rachel, he told officers that he had been at a bus depot in Broadston. It seemed unlikely that he could have driven to the house and back in the time required. Rachel had grown up with her 4 siblings in an adopted home. Her parents, Jim and Rose, created a loving home for the family. At school, Rachel enjoyed softball and was described as adventurous yet very loving and very well behaved. She would give anything a go and was great at decorating and creating a beautiful home for her family. When she was 17, she had met Joe. He was 2 years older than her when the couple worked at the same department store in the town. The first thing Joe noticed about Rachel was her height. Now, she was 5'11" inches tall, while Joe stood at 6'5", so the couple looked great together. Now, Joe had asked Rachel out on a date many times. Each time Rachel refused. Joe then overheard Rachel apparently telling someone that she played softball and was on a team. And one day, he turned up to her practice sessions and joined her team. It was not long after this that the couple turned romantic. And at the top of the Eiffel Tower, Joe proposed to Rachel. She said yes, and the couple seemed happy, excited for the future. About 2 years later, the couple got married in a beautiful ceremony, welcomed their first child. A year or so later, their second, both boys. Now the family were complete. They moved into their new home, a bungalow named Lambay View in Norwell in 2003. Rachel absolutely adored her boys. Everything she did was for her 2 children. Her life revolved around cooking nice food for them, meal times, taking her boys to and from childcare, and putting them to bed. Joe had also come from a loving family. He had many brothers and sisters, although his family life was slightly different. When he had been quite young, the marriage between his parents had fallen apart, leaving his mother to bring up the children. Joe was confident and determined to succeed at anything he put his mind to. He was determined to get ahead in his career. He did not have the qualifications needed to do it, but he was confident. He had the gift of the gab. He got to work early and left late, determined to show everybody that he was capable despite the qualifications. Then the family moved to their new home, but Rachel's mother had been concerned for her daughter, maybe that she would feel lonely in the home while he was always at work. But Rachel seemed to enjoy the new home, and she seemed to get on with everyone in the area. She would sell Avon and Tupperware around the local neighbourhoods to make a little bit of extra money, and really enjoyed it, meeting the new people. When they first moved in, she had a barbecue for all of the neighbours so she could meet everybody. Rachel was a private person. She didn't really discuss her marriage openly to friends or colleagues, although her close friends and family said that there may have been problems in the marriage, as Joe would leave early to go to the gym before work and would arrive home late each evening, leaving Rachel to do the lion's share with the children and the home life. Fast forward to Rachel's body being found, and scenes of crime officers, forensics, crime scene photographers were all arriving on scene. The detective that went into the home said that he would never forget what he saw. He described being able to see down to her skull through the injuries she had sustained. What happened must have been extremely violent. At first, it was a question whether this was a burglary gone wrong, but after police found over £1,000 worth of cash inside the home, it was felt that this was not the case, and they also felt that the robbery effort was staged, with the drawers being open and things being thrown around. Police carried out door-to-door inquiries. Some officers worked in rows, covering the green land around the home, looking for anything someone may have dropped, looking for the item used to carry out this terrible crime. By now, people had heard what was going on. Neighbours were shocked, and the family was devastated. Detectives had been looking for this weapon used to carry out this terrible crime, but they were still unable to find it. A few miles away from the house, a plastic bag was found and handed in to police. It contained a camera and some jewellery. These items had been described by Joe as being missing from the house. The detectives quizzed Joe on his whereabouts, starting from when he woke up that day. He told officers that he got up early, before starting his day going to the gym and then driving to work. He was seen on CCTV leaving his work at 8:07 a.m, telling colleagues that he was on his way to a bus depot in Broadstone. As he left, his colleague told him, "I'll meet you there." His job was to check the advertisements on the side of buses. So at around 8:45, Derek, Joe's colleague, had set off for the depot, but when he arrived, he called Joe as he couldn't find him. Joe told him that he was in another part of this large depot and would get to him soon. Now, when Rachel's mother asked Joe if Rachel had been having an affair or if someone wanted to harm her, Joe had stated neither of us have been having an affair, which had apparently seemed odd to her as she'd not asked him if he'd been having an affair, only Rachel. Then it came out that Joe had actually been having an affair with a woman named Nikki. Now Joe said it's over now, so don't worry about it. This turned out to be more of a relationship than it had been first made out. Rachel had apparently asked Joe various times if he'd been having an affair, and each time he had said no. The night before Rachel was found, the couple had had an argument about whether or not he was having an affair yet again, and this time he ended up sleeping in the spare room. Police spoke to Nikki, this girlfriend, who confirmed that they had had a relationship, although she said that it had not been serious and it was over. The forensic report was back and it stated that Rachel had been hit with something like a dumbbell various times in the head, cracking her skull in 2 places. Her face, shoulders and neck had various lacerations, and her arms had defensive wounds, as she had obviously tried to fight the person who had done this to her. A search of Joe's office was carried out and his computer was seized. Some of the emails that he had sent had been deleted, but they were able to recover them. Joe had been emailing his sister from work, talking about his marriage to Rachel, in which he spoke to his sister about his deep-seated hatred for Rachel, saying that she repulsed him and swearing about her when he discussed her. The house was cordoned off for 9 days, giving forensics plenty of time to look for clues. Joe's behaviour had become increasingly unusual and strange. At the funeral, family left him to say goodbye to his wife, and when they heard him oversay to the vicar, "You can put the lid on it now." One of the cards left with flowers stood out. It was Joe's. All it said was, "See you later, Joe." The family all wrote letters to Rachel and placed them inside the coffin. When Joe was allowed back into the house, he invited her parents over. So when they arrived, Joe had not cleaned up, and Rachel's blood was still covering the carpets and walls. He had started trying to reenact the scene in front of them, pretending to be the person who had done this, even pointing to the blood splatter on the ceiling and showing how the force of it created the droplets. He then told them that he felt that the blood in the bathroom was from where the killer had cleaned off his hands. Her parents stood in shock, not quite knowing what to say, getting quite upset just at the thought. And then when they went back downstairs, Joe started playing all the voicemails that he had sent to Rachel that day. After various journalists had arrived at his home each time, he would invite them in and show them the crime scene, all the blood and all. They asked if he was a suspect, and he told them he was. By now, police had not much apart from a feeling and circumstantial evidence. On the 8th of March 2005, it had been argued that they would exhume Rachel's body in order to retrieve the letters placed in the coffin to see what Joe's contained. The letter he had written was 5 pages long. This was some of which it contained. "Rachel, I love you very, very much. I can't think what I will ever do without you, and I don't want to think. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and you could never be replaced. This is the hardest letter I have ever had to write for reasons only we know about. Rachel, please, please forgive me. 2 words, 1 sentence, but I will say them forever." Still, there was nothing in this letter that police could arrest him with. It was ambiguous, yes, but it was not evidence. Although for family, now this confirmed their belief that he was guilty. In December 2005, police were still building their case. He was still their main suspect, but all they had was circumstantial evidence. A car seen on CCTV in the area near the couple's home that morning had been interesting to police, as it was the same make and model of car as Joe's. But they had struggled to make out the registration of the vehicle. Even though they enhanced the footage, they still struggled to work out the registration. So officers got to work looking for all of the owners of the same make and model of car. There were 2,500, and although they could not eliminate all of them, they could narrow it down enough to show that it had to have been his in the neighbourhood that morning. Detectives then looked into his phone data and mapped out the masts Joe's phones had been close to that morning. These showed that morning that Joe had left the home and set off towards the gym at 5:45 a.m. before driving to the petrol station and filling up the car. Whilst there, he had received a call from Nikki, the first of 8 calls that day. He stayed on the phone for about 28 minutes. He went to the gym and had a shower before heading to work. He sent an email saying his phone would be out of service for most of the morning and he would meet this guy, this Derek, at the bus depot. And despite him telling his colleague that he was there just in a different part of the depot, was he actually on his way home? Despite Joe not making any calls whilst being at the house, he had received 2 messages that pinged over a tower close to the home. It was only after this that the phone started to ping off a tower close to the depot in Broadston. When he arrived back at his office, one of his colleagues had said that he looked rather flushed and as though he'd been crying. She asked him if he was okay, and he said he was all right. She said he looked terrible, and not long after that he sped off. When police had spoken to Nikki, the girlfriend, about having the affair, she had initially played down the relationship, as he had told her to, but when police found out that they had been in touch 8 times that day, they knew that this Nikki was lying to them, and now she was getting grilled by officers for that. This did not go down well, and she did eventually tell officers that Joe had told her to play it down. She also eventually told them that Joe had said that if he did kill Rachel, he would get away with it. Nikki said that she didn't believe that he was being serious at the time. By now, police had a lot of evidence on Joe, and detectives found out that 4 months prior to this case, social services had received a report that Rachel was an unfit mother. It was completely unfounded. The emails found between Joe and his sister said, "I cannot believe she got out of it," and used various swear words to refer to Rachel. They discussed if Rachel and him got divorced, whether he would get full custody of the kids, and whether they could cut Rachel out of the picture forever. By now it was 2006, and Joe was brought back in to be interviewed again. They hoped that with his phone analysis, the witness statements, the emails, and all of the other bits of evidence, they had enough to finally charge him. But unfortunately, the Director of Public Prosecutions felt that they still needed more, and he was released without charge. The analysis of more mobile phone data showed that his phone had pinged off a mast close to the family home when Rachel's murder was actually taking place, contradicting his story about being miles away at a bus depot. The more police looked, the more they felt they had on him, and eventually the evidence was enough to convict him. In October 2006, police arrived at Joe's mother's home. It was then that Joe was arrested for the murder of his wife. In court, Joe entered a plea of not guilty, and on June the 25th, 2007, Joe was standing trial for the murder of his wife, Rachel. The prosecution laid out a case showing that Joe was not the happily married man that he tried to portray himself to be. Emails were read out, info about his affair was laid bare, and people discussed how he had acted after the murder. The evidence was strong. The phone analysis showed Joe to be lying about where he was that morning, and the CCTV of the car was described to be his. The defense tried to argue that this was all hearsay and that the evidence was circumstantial. It was heard in court that he had described to Nikki, the girlfriend, that they would start a life together, that the boys would be hers. Throughout the trial, Joe kept his head down, staring at the floor, showing absolutely no emotion whatsoever. And at the Central Criminal Court, the jury spent 9 hours deliberating before they had a verdict. They found Joe O'Reilly guilty. He was subsequently given a life sentence. Outside the court, people cheered, they held up banners, and the press was everywhere. Joe was driven off in a prison van to start his sentence in jail. Rachel's family said, "At long last, we have got justice for our darling Rachel." Joe has continued to fight to overturn his case, but each time it has been denied. Rachel's family continue to fight to keep him locked away for what he did to their beautiful, beautiful daughter.